Now is Henk Langenhoven, an economist from SAFCEC. A very warm welcome to you, Henk. Let's look at the construction industry. One only needs to look at how the construction companies have been faring over the past year or so to know that pipeline projects are not filtering through. Some say that the future looks slightly optimistic. What do you think?
I agree with that. It's just starting from a fairly low base. The confidence, let me put it that way. The activity levels are much higher than they were in 2000, which was really a terrible year and the bottom of a very long decline. So I do agree with it. All the signs are there that we are improving and that businessmen are more confident about that.
We are starting to see confidence improving when it comes to architects, to retailers of building materials and hardware. Also, quantity surveyors seem to also see a bit of an uptick in activity as well. But one lag we are seeing is the actual building of residential and non-residential as well. So clearly there is quite a big lagging effect from activity coming through on the bottom side of things and then filtering through to the top.
Yeah, there's always a lag between interest rates. For them, interest rates are very important for the residential market specifically, and I'm not an expert on it, but that's fairly common knowledge. There's a lag between that and confidence about it, because that's a leading indicator. So it takes a while after interest rates have dropped before building plans passed improves, because it has all to do with disposable income, and then you get the activity with the contractor. So we're sort of the third group in line after the change have taken place.
You mentioned building plans passed. What are we looking at this point in time?
It has turned, I think, a while back, and it is very, very closely related to what happens to interest rates. So if you plot interest rates inversely and you plot building plans, you get almost exactly the same graph. And I mean, interest rates started to drop a year ago. And that was primarily the reason for the slump as well. And unfortunately, few people remember, but it started in 2003-04 already. So they've been through a 4 or 5 year tough year.
Some attribute the slump because of the World Cup, that we had so many projects leading up to this event, some related to the World Cup, some not related to the World Cup, and this is why we saw quite a big decline.
I tend to disagree with that. There have been some projects, and the total value is in the order of about 40 billion. But since 2000, we had to add about 80 billion extra on our base load in civil engineering. I'm not talking about our housing market now. So it was important, but a lot of the projects that are going on actually have nothing to do with the World Cup, like the Gauteng freeway improvement schemes, the power stations that we're building, the pipeline that we're building, and more power stations to come, railway expansion that need to happen, electricity distribution that have started. So yes, it had a slowdown. The problem in my mind is lying actually deeper, and that is in decision making about projects. And one must remember that the large projects often just determine the spikes. The base load is determined in civil engineering again by local and provincial authorities. And a lot, and we've seen several reports now coming from Treasury and from other sources that the budgets aren't spent, or all of it isn't spent. There was one the other day where the Minister of Finance or Treasury said that only 25 or 23% of the capital budgets have been spent by the half year, which indicates that there is a problem in that decision-making pipeline. And that to me is the bigger issue, which is not a cyclical thing, and you can't throw money at it, because if you can't get the money out, then what happens?
Well, it's interesting you note that, because we keep hearing 840 billion rand, and that is a number that is constantly reiterated, whether it's at the mini budget or at the budget speech, and that money is set aside for the next 3 years. We are being optimistic and very hopeful that this money is going to start filtering through, but as you say, there is a problem about things being spent and, of course, the projects coming to the fore. Looking at what is happening on the ground, are we perhaps seeing some signals that this is going to change?
Yes, it is changing, definitely, and it causes a lot of confidence. I'm just hoping that it doesn't cause a lot of over expectations as well. One must remember that these projects do take, I believe that it's actually over a longer period than 3 years. And what is also important to understand, and it's not often said, is that it's all capex. It's not only construction spending. And that is important. One must remember that, if I can illustrate it by the power stations, the first phases of a power station construction is civil engineering. But the percentage is in the order of 10% of the overall value. Now we're talking about Medupi in the order of 140 or 150 billion, only 15 billion of that only, but just to give you a perspective, is civil engineering, and that is coming to an end. The other part, the mechanical, the structural, steel, the other parts of what goes into a power station, which is also incidentally the stuff often that are imported, is going on, but it's not in construction. So there's a big number. It is the overall, I would say, perspective consolidation of all the capex that central government, provincial government, local government, and the corporations will be doing over a number of years.
So in other words, not to get too optimistic about this, also interesting to note, when you look at the property price scenario that is playing out right now, we're still seeing a slight oversupply of houses, yes, and we haven't seen a recovery from the residential side of things. And this is what also is putting a dampener on new buildings coming to the fore, surely.
Yeah, look, new buildings, we've also gone through a little bit of a structural change there. In other words, it wasn't a normal cycle. Not that cycles are ever really completely normal, but we had a little bit of work extra for the World Cup, and extra hotels and extra shop. We were at the end of a consumer boom, just remember that. And a lot of shopping space and retail space were put in because of that. We went through a growth phase that started in '93 already, and it was mainly driven by consumers. So consumers walked through doors more, and there was a realization that there was a need for more shopping space. There's actually a very close relationship between the number of people in an area and the square meters of shopping space. So a lot of office development took place, and don't forget that in Gauteng specifically, the Gautrain, interestingly enough, had quite an impact on the location of centers, and which is something that I think a lot of people don't realize. So it's a different scene that people are catering for by providing these buildings, and that has come to an end. We hope that it will start again.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
where we leave it.